Welcome to the first edition of Break the Chalk, your weekly dose of sports betting analysis, where we're making bets, cashing checks, and making money moves. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so thankful to have you guys here with us on this journey that we're beginning today. It's been a long time coming for the both of us. Just to introduce myself, my name is Anthony Russo. I'll be your host for this show, as well as my co-host next to me, Trey Goodwin.
We really appreciate you guys for giving us a listen and tuning in. This is something that we feel really passionate about, and we've put a lot of work and effort into this, and we hope that you can enjoy it as much as we enjoy putting it together for you. Our show is in no way promoting illegal gambling. We are here to give you our sports analysis on good, valued bets that we see. We are not promoting you to make these bets if you do not have the legal jurisdiction to do so. We are here for everyone around the world to break the chalk.
This episode is about our top 10 college football regular season totals bets. This has nothing to do with any kind of postseason or bowl bets. This is strictly the 12-game regular season. We're going to start our top 10 list shortly. Our odds are from MyBookie. However, we promote that you shop the best rates around your city, your state, or online if it's legal in your state to find the best odds and find the best win totals for your teams that we're listing today as well.
What do you say we get this ball rolling? In no particular order, we start with the LSU Fighting Tigers, coming in with an over-under at 9 wins at minus 150, according to MyBookie. I actually tend to trend on the over for this team, and I know what you're thinking. A lot of you have seen the NFL draft, and you might think that they're losing Devin White, you're losing Greedy Williams, you're losing a 1,000-yard rusher, Nick Brossette, but what you're returning is the focal points of that defense. You have Christian Fulton, who's an AP All-American right now. You have Derek Stingley Jr., who's the number one recruit, depending on what website you're looking at, starting at the other corner. You're coming back with free safety Grant Delpit, who, barring injury, will be a top 5, if not top 10 pick in the NFL draft. And you're returning all of the talent on that offensive line except for that left guard spot at Garrett Brumfield getting drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But what you really want to pay attention to is returning senior class quarterback and Ohio State transfer Joe Burrow. He looks to try to take this offense to the next level with the new passing game coordinator hire and Joe Brady from the New Orleans Saints. Coach O and the Tigers are really thrilled to have this guy on the staff, and we'll see if he can take that LSU offense to the next level.
And when you're looking at the non-conference schedule, you've got Georgia Southern, at Texas, Northwestern State, and Utah State. When you're looking at this non-conference schedule, the only tough challenge you see is at the second game, which is at Texas. Now, Texas does promote a challenge. However, I don't think it's enough for them to overcome LSU. I do see LSU starting off 5-0, where the telling game is with number 8 Florida. That is going to be a big game to determine our over. However, I do believe LSU will win that game. They're going to go undefeated all the way up to Alabama. And with history being an indicator, we're going to assume a loss at Alabama. And they're going to finish off the season beating Ole Miss at Ole Miss, beating Arkansas, and beating number 11 Texas A&M, which is going to be a huge revenge game from last year and that 7 overtime defeat they took.
And I'm right there with you. I look at up and down this roster and up and down the schedule, and you see a couple of games which you might consider to be a trap game. That Mississippi State falling right after a big emotional game with Florida right before you host Auburn at home. As you know, the Auburn game with LSU last year ended on a last-second field goal kick by Cole Tracy. I see 2 big emotional games here. You cannot, as an LSU Tiger, go into this game and overlook a Mississippi State offense with Joe Moorhead at the helm coming from Penn State. You have to assume that when you play these big SEC games that you have to consider the emotion side of it. These kids aren't professional athletes. They're human beings, and these kind of things take place. I think that it's completely fair to assume that Florida's going to be a really hard game. And like Anthony said, that's going to be a really telling game for us on the over here. But the question with the Florida game is, can Felipe Franks with Dan Mullen move this offense enough on this LSU defense with the talent that they have at their skill positions? Can they move LSU's defensive line off the ball with that hurt and banged up offensive line? And I don't see Florida being able to compete with the star power that this LSU team has. I see LSU taking this game and finishing the season out 11-1.
And I also agree with 11-1. Those two games give you a little bit of wiggle room with Florida and potentially an Auburn or a Mississippi State, where the over will still succeed with the over 9. You're giving up a little bit of juice at minus 150. However, if you're shopping around, you find a better deal in Mississippi or in Vegas or any of those markets that allow sports gambling, we're all for that. But we support the over 9 at minus 150. We're laying enough juice here to believe that this is going to happen, and we're going to make some money off of this. We're going to stick with the SEC here. We've got a couple more SEC picks in this top 10. We're going to go with Arkansas here. The over-under is at 5. In some markets, you find it at 5.5, but on my bookie, it went to 5. We're going to take the under here at minus 110. Really good juice there. I think this is one of my top 3 bets in this top 10. I mean, with a winless conference record in 2018, I see somewhat similar of a repeat performance here. The easiest SEC game is at Ole Miss, who will potentially be looking to avenge their home opener to Memphis. I think Ole Miss will potentially lose that game, so they can come in with a vengeance and win that game too against Arkansas. I see no wins against any SEC West opponents. That looks like a 4-8 record to me, assuming they actually get past their non-conference schedule. They were 2-2 last season on that non-conference schedule. And with Portland State, Colorado State, San Jose State, and Western Kentucky, the only true threat I see here is Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is a good ball club. They're very underrated. They've always been very well coached, and they always have given a lot of major teams problems in the past. So I see a potential trap game for there. I still do see a 4-8 record here. I think it's very safe to go under 5 games here, even with that extra game giving you a tie on a break-even point on your money. We don't believe it will get there, but at least you have that extra game cushion to break even on your money and avoid a loss there.
Yeah, I actually agree with you here, Anthony. When I look down at this schedule, I just see too many games here where Arkansas is just outmanned and outmatched. You could give them Portland State and Colorado State if you want to. Western Kentucky, like you said, a very underrated non-conference game that they scheduled there. Brent Bielema actually puts together a pretty good offensive line most of the time for this Arkansas Razorbacks, but not this year. They're too banged up. You have a new transfer quarterback coming in, Nick Starkel from Texas A&M. Can he bring this offense to have enough points to get to over this 5 over-under for the team? I just don't really see it happening, to be honest. I think you can potentially get maybe your first win in 2 years in the SEC against Ole Miss. You could maybe catch Kentucky sleeping going over there in Kentucky. But really, when you look at it from a standpoint of talent, John Chavis doesn't really have that much to work with on the defense. You have a couple of skill position guys that'll make it to the league. But when you look at this team from an overall standpoint, give me the under all day, and there's not really too much juice on it to lay. I like this bet a lot. Next up, we have the Tennessee Volunteers coming in with the over at 6.5, and you can find these odds at minus 130 depending on the website that you check out. I really like the over here. I think that Jeremy Pruitt leading this team into the season after going 5-7 last year could have did better, but you could have did worse. And I think that when you start the season off with Georgia State, BYU, and Chattanooga, you look to aim to get your kids ready to play. With the number 12 nationally ranked recruiting class, I think Jeremy Pruitt is doing something really good with this team. I like the direction that he's putting them in. A lot of pressure on Tennessee to perform this year. I like them on this over a lot. You finished that Chattanooga game up by having Florida at Florida and Georgia, Mississippi State, Alabama, and South Carolina. That's a tough 5-game stretch, Anthony. That's really a tough 5-game stretch. I really like your chances here in that 5-game stretch, though, with South Carolina and Mississippi State being at home. You have the luxury of having Georgia at home. I don't think that it's enough, and I don't really see you getting past Alabama. You got a shot with Florida. Florida is one of those tricky games. This game is usually played during the day. That causes for a little bit more confusion. Sometimes players aren't ready for that. You could catch Florida sleeping and catch a win out here. Nonetheless, if you could just take 2 from those 5 games, I think you're putting yourself in great position to follow that up with UAB, Kentucky, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. I'll be honest with you. I like Tennessee's chances here in all 4 of those final games. I think Missouri is a sneakily good team that can easily finish this season off, maybe 8 or 9 wins, more than what the experts might think. You play that at Missouri, but I like Tennessee's chances here. Give me the over all day on this one.
And when it comes down to this over, I mean, you're at 6.5. you might not have to sweat these last couple of games on the schedule. I mean, you might have it potentially if you can get past Kentucky and all those games we just mentioned. I don't think you have to sweat out the last 2 games. I know we mentioned Missouri is a tough game. They might lose that game, but I don't even think by then you'll have to sweat that game. I think the over is going to win by then. I think it's going to be a perfect bet at minus 130. Give me the over all day on this. All right, next on the list, we got Louisville. They're opening off at a 3.5 over under at plus 100 for the under. We really like the under here. I just don't see any way possible they get 4 games here, and we're going to explain why. I mean, you open off at Notre Dame, that's going to be an L. You're going to go 1-1 after beating Eastern Kentucky. Western Kentucky, like we mentioned earlier against Arkansas, it's a trap game. You could potentially lose that game. Right. You can assume a win, you can give them 2-1, and you're going to go to Florida State, and you're going to lose that game. So you're 2-2. Boston College, there's a lot of 50-50 games in here with the ACC. I mean, you've got Boston College, Wake Forest, Virginia, Miami, and the entire conference in here, their entire conference schedule. You can literally flip a coin and you never know. And a lot of these things based off of history are leaning towards them losing. They've made no improvements to their team. They've got 3 quarterbacks competing for the job right now from a horrendous 2018 season. They've got decent running back production, but they will not make up for that with the weak O-line from losing a couple of starters from the line. Defense was good back when Petrino coached, but they collapsed back in 2018. No real improvements shown here. They hired Brian Brown as a defensive coordinator from Appalachian State, which will help. I just don't see them overcoming the 3.5 here. I mean, you can try and convince me, Trey, on here. I just don't see any way possible they get to 4.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really don't see too many games on here where, and a lot of the times when you look at a football schedule, if you just do the eye test, you have a few that just jump off the page at, wow, that's going to be a win. Okay, so what's next? And you don't really see that much here with this Louisville team. I think that it's really still too early in the developing process for Coach Satterfield's tenure. 4 wins for me is the absolute ceiling with this team. I just don't see it. You have Eastern and Western Kentucky, which, again, like we've said several times now, you can argue that Western Kentucky is better than Louisville in all regards. It's a trap game. It's a good team. They're well coached. Their skill positions are nicely laid out. They have wide receivers. They got the size. Give me the under on 3.5. With having to win both Boston College and Syracuse, a good, well-coached Syracuse team, which I think that Syracuse could easily go on their over as well, 8 or 9. Give me the under on them at 3.5 all day. Next up, we have the UCF Golden Knights. Finished up the season with a 40-32 loss to the LSU Tigers last year in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. They come in at a negative 125 over on 9 wins. I actually tend to like this over here, Anthony. You look up and down the schedule, there's really only a few games that really come off the paper to me that seem as though they may have trouble winning that game, with or without Mackenzie Milton, who, unfortunately, if you haven't seen that, suffered a terrible leg injury, and you really hate to see that for anybody. But with that allows people to come in and make plays. And I think the backup here, Daryl Mack, had a really strong outing against LSU. A big, solid frame, hard to get down, rough, hard-nosed thrower. You play Stanford on September 14th. I don't love UCF in this game. I think that's the first real test of the season after you follow up Florida A&M and Florida Atlantic. You follow that up with Pittsburgh, and then you also have Cincinnati on the schedule. Now, I tend to like Cincinnati a little bit. I like what they're doing on defense, nice, quick skill positions. I think if you can go 2-1 here with these 3 games, I think you hit 10 or 11 wins easy. Quite frankly, I don't think there's too much juice on the schedule for UCF to miss this. Give me the over on 9 all day.
I'm right here with you on the over 9 here. I mean, when you're looking at those 3 question mark games in Stanford, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati, asking to go 2-1 there is not a tough task at hand. I like Daryl Mack here. He's got a lot of upside and potential with strong outings against Memphis, and he did hold his own against LSU, where they did lose their supposed 2017 national championship. They've got weapons all around their quarterback, even without Milton. They've got strong running backs and receivers that will make up for any lapse in positivity. Def will carry this team a far way in times of trouble. If the offensive line can hold its own, they can actually go undefeated, I believe. I just don't see it happening. I don't predict a 12-0 record. However, I do see them going easily 10-2 here, barring any injuries, obviously. The over 9 is strong here. Bet that all day. Next pick we have is Purdue. They've got an over-under set at 7. I tend to agree with the under here at -130. You're not giving up a lot of juice here. When you look at their schedule, there's only 3 games you can see that you can actually predict a win. And even with those 3 games, that you can consider them question marks if you're a fan of the Big Ten. Not as knowledgeable in the Big Ten, but knowing the growth of that conference, they've got a lot of teams growing and that can challenge these big time teams. And Purdue had a really good season last year at 6-7. I know that doesn't sound like it was good, but with their new coach Jeff Brom, he's at 13-13. After Drew Brees departed from that college, you haven't had a lot of talk about their college football team. It tends to lean in the basketball direction. They have some good games. They upset Ohio State last season, but they also got blown out in their bowl game, lost 63-14 to Auburn in that bowl game. So the under here looks good. Like I said, you've got Nevada on the road to open up the season, and you've got Vanderbilt, TCU, Minnesota, and at Penn State. You can easily open off the season 1-4, 2-3, best case scenario, and maybe even 0-5 if you drop that game at Nevada. I mean, Vanderbilt's no joke. They're in the SEC. I see a clash of conferences there that can lean towards Vanderbilt. I tend to think that's going to be a 1-4 start. You have a couple of easy games here and there with Maryland and Illinois that I see them getting 3 to 4 wins maybe. But when you've got teams like Penn State, at Iowa, at Northwestern, and at Wisconsin, it's just such a tough road to get to 7. I mean, I actually have this team at 5-7. And that's being generous. I mean, this team could potentially win a lot of games with their roster, but they can also lose a lot of games. And I tend to agree with that aspect of things. I think they're going to go 5-7. And like I said, that's being nice. They could potentially go 4-8 with this team. So the under here is so money, and you're only getting it at -130. That's a great price.
Yeah, Anthony, I'm right here with you. There's a couple of shining points on this team, one of which is being 6'4", 225, Elijah Sindelar. He's got good upside. But what you have to look at is, can these players stay healthy? And like we've said before, I mean, you're not talking about a pro. These are kids. They have to go to class. They only have a set schedule. It's not the easiest thing in the world to stay healthy, especially with a lingering injury like you see here. You said it again, like the 63-14 loss to Auburn was an absolute embarrassment. You look down at the schedule, there's a couple of games here that you can easily just cross out as a loss. You got Penn State, and you got to go to Iowa. And you got really bad odds to go to Wisconsin and win that. And then you got to try to win at Northwestern too. Give me the under all day on this team. I don't really see too much advantage in this. You don't really give up much juice with this either. Looking at the fact that it's 130, that's not too much. You can still make some good money with it if you're financially stable enough to let someone hold on to your money for a little while.
We're going to stay in the Big Ten, Trey. We're going to stay with Wisconsin. We've got an under of 8.5 at -140. Giving up a good bit of juice there, but I think the under here is a really solid bet. And let me explain why. They went 8-5 in 2018. It's considered an underwhelming season. They had a really good team. A lot of things didn't fall their way, and some call it underwhelming. With holes at quarterback and on defense, things can get really nasty with this brutal schedule. I mean, you open up the season at South Florida against Charlie Strong's team. They've got a 66.2% chance according to the FPI rankings. I think that's a little overvalued there. I think South Florida will give them a good run. They could potentially lose that game. And then you got Central Michigan. I see them starting at 1-1, and then after that, it's just a plethora of mixing and matching with your good and bad conference teams in the Big Ten. I just don't see them getting to 9 here. I mean, I see them starting with a record at 7-5, and that's being generous. I mean, you're going to lose to Michigan State and Iowa. I think those are the question mark games too. I mean, when you look at this schedule, Nebraska's got a good ball club. Minnesota's got a good ball club. And so does Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, those are 4 right there that I'm already marking off as losses. So when you include Iowa and Michigan State in there, I already, according to my eye test, think they're going to lose those 2 games as well. I mean, this could be a tragic season and a big setback season for the Badgers. Take the under all day here. I don't see them getting to 9 at any aspect of this season unless a multitude of freshmen step up and play well.
Next up here, we have the Arizona Wildcats with Kevin Sumlin leading this crew from a 5-7 record last season in his second season as head coach. They actually open up here at 6.5 games. I trend towards the under here. You're laying a little bit of juice here at minus 145. But if you shop the right websites, you could still get a pretty good value bet for that. You put in a certain amount of money on a team that you really don't believe in winning these games, you could get a pretty good profit from this, Anthony. When you look at the schedule, you start the game at Hawaii. It's a pretty nice road game, pretty nice vacation spot. Not a team you want to see your first game. A team that's made improvements. They don't have too many question marks on their offensive line. I think Arizona does. I think that I struggle to see games here that you take confidently. You could easily say that Oregon State would be a pretty good game at USC, maybe. I have a hard time seeing you beat Utah. Have you seen the cattle on the Utah defensive line? I don't really see it here. Texas Tech, UCLA, there's too much offensive firepower on this schedule here. I think Kevin Sumlin struggles to reach that 6.5 game. Give me the under all day. I think your ceiling here is 6, and if your ceiling here is at 6, that's kind of how I like to look at these bets. It's a push or a really good win, and if that's the case, give me the under all day on this one.
I really like the juice here. I just see so many question mark games going the South for them. I see only 2 games that they can actually win, Northern Arizona and Oregon State. There's about 4 or 5 question mark games that the experts just can't seem to get an eye on, especially with Texas Tech and UCLA. I mean, Texas Tech might be down this year, but good luck keeping up with that offense. And UCLA, it's a good ball club. You never know with them. I mean, Chip Kelly's getting those boys riled up. You never know if his system's actually been implemented from the previous season. If he's got his system locked and loaded, that can be an L right there as well. And going to Colorado and getting that climate change and playing at an altitude, I just see a lot of question mark games on here, especially after their 5-game stretch to open up the season. You're going to Washington, USC, Stanford. After Oregon State, you got Oregon, Utah, and Arizona State. I mean, tell me where you get 2 or 3 wins there. It's really hard to find 7 wins there. I've actually got them at 4-8 this season, with maybe a possibility of getting to 5-7. And when you've got those predictions with my eye, all day on the 6.5 under. I mean, I just don't see any way they even get to 6. So take the under here.
Next up, you have the Uconn Huskies. Pretty disappointing season last year for Randy Edsall and the Huskies. Listen, you hate to say that they're going to have a more than disappointing season than you did the year before, but when you look at the schedule, I honestly just think that it's at that point where you have to think about maybe making some coaching changes. You open here at 2.5 wins. Under is at negative 125. That's not bad juice at all. Russo, not bad at all. You can get a pretty significant amount of revenue from that. You open the season off against Wagner on the 29th of August. That's your best chance to win all season by a far margin. You're not looking at any other game here and telling me that you have a good chance to win. You have a few games here that you can cross out as a almost guaranteed loss. UCF, Illinois, Houston, yeah, mark those off for me. USF and Charlie Strong, you might can make a run at that. UMass at UMass, that's pretty difficult. Navy and East Carolina, you can say all day that you have good odds to make that game happen. But at the end of the day, can this team compete with other teams that have higher talent and more production coming back that don't have production in the bottom 10 of the FBS? I just don't see it here. I find it very hard to have UConn getting to 3 games. Give me the under on 2.5 all day at 125.
And for our 10th and final pick for our college football regular season totals, I've got Navy, and I'm going to post their schedule here. You've got an over-under at 5.5, and you're laying minus 140 on the under here. Just please take a look at this schedule and try and find 6 games where they're going to win. I mean, I can go into a deep analysis on each game here, but I just don't see any possible way they get the 6. I mean, they've got one surefire win to open up the season against Holy Cross, but other than that, you've got a lot of L's coming your way with only about 2 or 3 question mark games. And Uconn, who we just mentioned, is a part of those question marks and showing how bad they are. I don't see any possible way this team gets to 6 wins. I think this is the easiest bet of them all. You're only laying minus 140. I think you put a lot of money on that, and you come home with a lot of cash as well. So take the under all day on this. And that wraps up our top 10 picks for the college football regular season totals. Thank you so much for staying with us here and listening to our picks. We hope you take our analysis to heart, cash these tickets, and win some money here. We're going to come at you with some weekly episodes. We're going to do college football. We're going to do NFL, and we're even going to do some UFC in there, some MMA picks. We're big MMA fans here. And we're going to try and get all sports when they come into sport. I know NBA and NHL are coming up rather soon, but right now we're going to stick with the football and the MMA, and we're going to get you a lot of money. Just please stay with us. Give us a like and subscribe to this video and to our channel, and please leave a comment for any kind of analysis you want to hear going forward, or if you have any kind of conflicts with our picks, please challenge us, and we're open to hearing any kind of opinions you have about our picks.
And as a preview to our Week 1 college football picks here to start this season, we have the Miami Hurricanes taking on the 8th-ranked Florida Gators here in Disney World at 6 p.m. Central Time this Saturday, August 24th. You have a 7-point spread going in Florida's direction at minus 280, according to Vegas. Listen, that's not that good of odds, but I like the spread here. The juice is a little tight, but I like it. I like what Dan Mullen is doing here with Felipe Franks at the quarterback position. Can Miami, with a disappointing season last year as they opened the season up to that big-time loss to the LSU Tigers, can they avenge that loss to another SEC team of similar stature? With some questions here on the offensive line for the Florida Gators, do they get the job done? I trend to think that they do. I don't think Florida has to dig too deep to win this game. Come in, play hard, pound the football, establish the offensive line, and establish the line of scrimmage, and I think you get out here with a win pretty easily here.